I'm here to introduce Jacqueline Charles. Hopefully you guys know who she is, because everyone knows who she is. Right now she's the Miami Herald Caribbean Correspondent, where she covers Haiti and the English-speaking Caribbean. Her job has also taken her as far as Liberia and Italy, correct? Okay, cool. Earlier this year, she was praised by NABJ, National Association of Black Journalists, where she was named Journalist of the Year for her coverage in Haiti, the earthquake that occurred. She started off at the Herald at the age of 14 as a high school intern. They call her Miami Herald Baby. So she's been there a while. She won't reveal how long. Some of her beats have included education. She's covered Broward County. She's covered several number of beats. Done some cop reporting. She's done a couple of things within everything. In 2006, she officially became part of the Miami Herald World Desk. And if there's one bonus about Ms. Charles that you guys want to know, one sneak peek into her life, is that she looks at journalism as a license to be nosy. So if you like being nosy and you feel that one day you might have a career in journalism, maybe listening to Ms. Charles will help you jumpstart that. Ms. Charles?
Hi, good morning. Well, thank you guys for having me here. And before I start, I want to point out one of my colleagues, Jose Iglesias, who's like in the back. But I'm going to start the talk. I'm going to show you guys a video. It's and this, well, it's not a video. It's a documentary. And for those of us who are in journalism, one of the things you probably realize is that journalism has changed over the years. It used to be, you're in TV, you're, in newspapers, you're in radio. Well, today we do it all. Myself, I've done radio segments. I've also done my own videos on stories. I take my own pictures at times. It's a lot of work, but it's also a lot of fun. And last year in 2010, shortly after the earthquake, I arrived in Haiti on the 13th of January. The earthquake happened on the 12th at 4:53, and I was in Haiti before noon. I was one of the first planes that actually landed in the country. I managed to get the president of the country on the telephone, who at that time basically told me that the capital was destroyed and asked when was I coming. And I said, I'm trying to get there, but we need permission to land. And so my one little seat on this charter plane cost $3,000 one way. A lot of money, but for the Miami Herald, this was an important story. And at that point, we basically deployed about 7 journalists and photographers. We sent 3 the evening before. Yes, they went through the Dominican Republic. Myself, I was on this charter that the Associated Press had also chartered, so we went in with them. Jose, he went on another plane that was going down a relief flight. And interesting enough, we all left Miami at different times, but somehow all converged around the same time. And just as I landed and I looked in the front, Wyclef Jean had also landed. And then I stuck myself onto him and saying, okay, listen, we need to figure out where do we go, because there were no cars. It was as if an atomic bomb had dropped on the country. And we literally walked for a couple of miles just trying to hail a Haitian taxi, which is known as a tap-tap, to try and get us from the airport basically up into the city, into the burbs, to see what had happened. And so we're going to start off, I'm just going to show you a little bit of this clip, and it's available on our website, which is www.miamiherald.com, and there's a /Haiti. We just won an Emmy for this documentary, and then recently we did a follow-up, and the documentary is called Nous Bouquet, which is in Creole, we're tired, we're fed up. And the follow-up is Nous Bouquet 2 years later. And this was all shot, all filmed by Jose, who started up as a still photographer, and now is doing videos and documentaries. So I say all of that to show you that there is a future in journalism, which we'll talk about a little bit. But just to give you an idea of what awaited us. And it's being narrated by Edwidge Dantica, which is the Haitian American writer who lives here. Let me see. Oh, I think this. Wait, sorry, guys. Wait. Just want to make sure I expand it. Arrow, move the arrow. Right? Right there?
The name time was called Haiti, land of high mountains. The Spaniards colonized it, and the French eventually governed it, bringing to its shores hundreds of thousands of kidnapped African slaves. Saint-Domingue, as it was now called by its rulers, ethnically and culturally changed. Eventually, the enslaved Africans overthrew their French oppressors and gained their historic independence. Louverture, Dessalines, Christophe, and Pétion led this unprecedented slave revolt. Their courageous struggle gave birth to the nation of Haiti, ignited the flame of liberty in the Caribbean, and provoked the vengeful scorn of the world. For much of its history, Haiti has stood alone, isolated for its defiance, punished for its symbolism. Tumult, suffering, and sacrifice have always been part of life in Haiti. And yet, at the dawn of the year 2010, the tide of hardship seemed to be turning. On January 11th of that year, promises of political stability and some economic progress seemed to be taking root. For many Haitians, there was reason to be hopeful. On January 12th, mercilessly and cruelly, the course of Haiti's history once again took a drastic turn.
So many bodies dead, so many dead bodies, so many, everything. This is unbelievable.
The government cannot do anything. We cannot do anything. Anything. Nothing. We cannot do nothing for the people.
I have never seen any rescue workers. I've only seen regular people trying to dig their family out of the rubble. It is a situation that could become tense, but what I've seen is cooperation. I've seen a community, an incredibly resilient community, helping each other and helping themselves. That to me is the biggest issue. I have not seen a UN vehicle, I have not seen firefighters, I have not seen police officers directing traffic. I have seen Haitians helping Haitians.
As the earth shook for several ominous seconds that afternoon, Haitians' aspirations for a brighter future were decimated by the wrath of the Western Hemisphere's most catastrophic natural disaster. Already hardened by misfortune and despair, the Haitian will for survival would now be further challenged.
Risque tout le monde vient là avec moi là assister, mais Gibson là l'entour nous pas capable faire tout pour lui. Frère là qui bosse enterré les mandé si moi monsieur à deuxième, même constater moi là deuxième vraiment, mais moi là mais l'entour là pas capable faire pour lui. Alors ou même comme dans l'autre bois, si nous ca rentrer faire ça ouais nous capable pour lui. Moi même pas capable faire pour lui, nous connaît comment m'a vivre.
This is actually about an hour, and again, it's available on our website for free, and you can watch it. But I wanted to open up and to start with that because every image that you saw actually happened. This is the image of the gentleman running. That was actually inside the presidential palace. Those were the cameras that were inside, and we at the Miami Herald, we were the only ones that actually had that image. And what happened was through my sources that I had, I learned that this image actually exists. I'm just talking to a source one day, and he said, have you seen or have you heard about the video from the palace cameras? I said, no, I hadn't even realized that there were actually cameras inside the palace or weren't even thinking about it. And he started to explain to me what was on the video, and I said, can I get a copy of that video? And I actually ended up getting a copy of that video from somebody close to the president, we'll say. And we actually held on to it. When some of our editors found out that we had it, the first instinct was, oh God, we got to do something with this. We have to put it online. And we were working on this documentary, and we said, no, we want to hold this for this documentary, and we want to feature it as part of that. In the beginning, you saw a lot of, images, and those were still photography, that was taken by, again, another one of our colleagues. Several of our colleagues, in fact, while we were out just doing regular reporting. There was an image of the kids in the T-shirts. That was actually Haitian Flag Day, May 17th, 2010, and it was right around the corner from where we lived, which happens to be 2 houses down from the current president of Haiti at this moment. And so I was in Haiti. I arrived on the 13th. I basically was in Haiti for a year and a half. The Miami Herald made this commitment to the story, even though at the time we had laid off a lot of journalists and things have been very tough here. But for us, Haiti is not a foreign story. Like Cuba, it is a local story for us because of the community that we live in and the interests, because people still remain connected to the island. There's a saying that when Haiti sneezes, Miami catches a cold, and so you see that a lot, and you saw that a lot, with the earthquake and the disaster. And so, with the documentary itself, what you saw was it was an opportunity in the course of just regular reporting of different kinds of stories, and especially the reporting of this disaster. We were able to get access, we were able to get images. And in the beginning, didn't really know, what the story was going to say or where it was going to go. And we didn't necessarily want to do a documentary about the earthquake, but wanted to use the earthquake as an opportunity to talk about Haiti and what has happened in the history, and sort of now where does it go from here. And so, that is the finished product, and I'm very happy with it and very happy to say that it has been, well received. I know the images are very tough, and I have to tell you, for me personally, this story, this disaster did not start on January 12, 2010. There was an image in there of a man holding a baby, and that was actually 2 years earlier in Gonaïves, in the city of Gonaïves. That August, Haiti had been hit by 4 hurricanes, you might as well call them, right after the other in 30 days. Imagine, first the south gets hit, Then about a week later, there's another storm that comes in, and then the third one hits the city of Gonaïves, which basically sits like a bathtub. And so, and all of the mountains around it are basically deforested. They're barren. So any slight rain and basically just mud comes down. And so this city, was literally underwater. And I arrived in Haiti. I had a really, really good source with the United Nations who unfortunately died in the earthquake. But I called him and I said, listen, I need to get into Gonaïves. The roads are cut off. The Associated Press was there, but they were stuck. They couldn't get out of there. The winds were really difficult, so flying was very hard. The Prime Minister at the time, Michel Pierre-Louis, was actually on her way when one of the mountains started peeling off on the road, and basically they had to turn back because her vehicle basically was getting washed away. And so the UN was finally looking at being able to fly in because the winds finally died down. And the source of mine, Chevalier, he had one seat. And he says, I've got one seat. I said, okay, it's me and the photographer, but you know what? The images are more important. Can you get my photographer on that chopper? And then I'll just do it by phone, or he gets me numbers, or we'll work it, but we need those images to tell this story because it had been days and nobody had gotten access to it. He calls me back and he says, I'm giving up my seat. I'm going to give you my seat. So myself and Pat Farrell, we landed in Gonaïves on the first, flight that was able to get in there, and the UN said, okay, you guys have an hour because we are taking off in an hour, and if you're not here, you're going to get left behind. So we landed at the UN base, and I have to tell you, when we were coming in, literally all you saw was just mud, just mud. And when we got there, the water was, just high. And the further you went, the higher the water went. And there were actually people who were on rooftops because the water had just basically covered their homes. And these are like concrete block homes that we were talking about. And so, Pat and I, we went as far as we could get there. Pat doesn't speak Creole, and so the situation was really tense, and I'm translating for, he's like, don't tell me, I don't want to know. And then we went with a Reuters photographer, and he passes out. So the Reuters photographer passes out because he hadn't eaten anything, and we're like, listen, we got to go, we have to go. And he's like, I can't, just go without me. We grabbed his camera, and then we basically dragged him back to the chopper. Again, I'm the Miami Herald, he's Reuters. It's not a competitive situation when you're in something like that. When you're a reporter and you're in a field, especially when you're in a strange country or you're in a strange environment, whether it's a riot, it's an unrest, you have to remember that you're all in this together. And so, it's one for all. So, it becomes the issue of survival. A couple of days later, after the Gonaïves, we decided to try and get back into Gonaïves on one of the few roads that we could go. Again, I get a phone call from a source at the disaster office, says, where are you? I said, outside of Gonaïves. He says, you need to turn back now and come to the capital. I said, but wait a minute. He says, no, the storm is coming. We don't know where it's going to hit. You need to turn back and you need to come back now. We turned back, and the last bridge that we passed over, it collapsed. That morning, about 3 a.m. in the morning, the final storm, Ike, came. And Gonaïves got hit, but even more tragically was a city called Cabaret, which is just north of the capital. Pat and I, again, didn't know what we were going to find, but we got on the road, tried to figure out if we could get through to Cabaret. We're on this major road, and the road literally had turned into a river. And there was a guy in front, and I said, no, you go first. I want to see how deep the water is, because again, you get stuck, you can't, you're a reporter, you're like, I need to file, I need to, get out of this. And by the time we got into that city, around every corner, there was a dead body. There were 2 rivers that spilled over. One river brought down babies. The other river brought down old people. And by the time I got to the scene where this man had been looking for his stepdaughter, who he had raised from the time of infancy, walked into a yard of a motorcycle shop, and there were basically 24 dead babies that were just on the ground. And again, no one could have imagined what we were going to see when we arrived. And at that point, he and I were the first foreign journalists that had arrived, in that city. And Pat Farrell actually won a Pulitzer Prize, for those images. So, as I said, the disaster, it started, way before then. And then after that, we had a school collapse, we had malnutrition, we had all of these issues. But it's not all about grim. I mean, there are definitely, moments of hope. There are beautiful stories to be told. One of the things that I love about, my job, and I said I have one of the best jobs in the newsroom and one of the best jobs in America, is that, you have a country that is your tapestry. Yes, you have to, write about the elections, you have to write about the chaos, you have to write about the uncertainty, but at the same time, you also get to write about other things that are happening in the country. Last week, I wrote a story about, International Jazz Festival that was coming to Haiti, and I just didn't want to write a story about a festival, but wanted to use this to talk about jazz and Haiti, not two things that people think about, but if you think about the fact that jazz was discovered in New Orleans, and one of the first migrations into New Orleans was Haitians from Saint Dominique, which was Haiti was known at the time. You see that influence there that dates back into the 1800s. And now today you're seeing that, jazz, this infusion of a different kind of music being part of, this country's cultural rebirth. And it was also an opportunity to tell Haitians a little bit about the history. For instance, who was the first person that introduced an FM radio, in the country? A lot of people didn't know it. And this gentleman is still alive today, and he's been one of the people who plays jazz every Sunday, on one of the radio dials. So, that's always a challenge because people always think that they know everything, and so you have to tell them something they don't know. And then at the same time, the audience that I'm writing for you guys. You've probably never been to Haiti, you may not be Haitian, but you're maybe interested, in the story. So how do you frame the story in a way to tell you that, here's why you should care, here's why it matters, and here's why, it's interesting. Talk a little bit more, and then I'll open it up for questions because that will probably give you a little bit more, idea of what we do and how we do it. Yes, I started the Miami Herald when I was 14 as a high school intern. At the time, I was at Booker T. Washington Junior High when we still had a 9th grade. So you get an idea how long that was. And for me, it was just my after-school job. I worked in the Neighbors Northwest office, and I would go there. So when my friends went to, Burger King, or they went to Miami-Dade courts and did, internships, I went to the Miami Herald. And so, my junior year, I went to University of Florida, did cell science research because I really liked science and was really strong in math. Writing was just something, hey, I could do. But I did not envision a career as a journalist. And it so happened that the company that owned the Miami Herald, which was called Knight Ridder at the time, had a scholarship where every year they selected 3 students from around the country for this $20,000 4-year guaranteed internship. And you just have to work for a Knight Ridder paper after you graduate for 1 year as your payback. And so they, made me apply because, again, I was like, I'm going to college. I'm going to be a doctor. And I applied. I won. And so, then I went to UNC Chapel Hill. And again, I'm there on a journalism scholarship, but I'm still thinking I'm pre-med, I'm pre-med. And then at some point I said, I don't like this idea of being poor in college. I don't know if I can do this another couple of years, in med school. So I'll do the journalism thing, and then I'll work for the year, and then I'll go back to school. Well, back to school never really happened. But what did happen was just a lot of great opportunities. I interned at the Detroit Free Press and the New York Times, but the Miami Herald is the only paper that I've worked at. My first assignment, I started August 31st, and basically a month and a half later, I get a phone call that says, listen, do you have a sleeping bag? No. Okay, you need to go get one because I need you on a plane tomorrow. Aristide is coming back to Haiti. And I'm like, huh? and that was scary. You know, I am part Haitian. I was born in this little island called the Turks and Caicos. My mother's Haitian. But my experience with Haiti was like as a kid with my mother always being my guide. I had never gone there on my own, much less to do a story. And so when I arrived, I remember all of these foreign journalists with the bulletproof vests, and they're all standing at the airport because the UN was there, and it was a very crazy times. But at the same time, I'm like, wow, you know, I'm here and I'm seeing history. You know, the country's first democratically elected president, kicked out by exile, and he's coming back. And it was just really like amazing. And that's what it's been ever since then. I mean, Aristide came back again, you know, last year. And I broke the story on when he was arriving. And I was at the airport when he arrived. And I was there when Jean-Claude Duvalier, the former dictator, who had been out of the country for 30 years, and he decides to come. And this is just sort of a sidebar of a funny story because, you know, when you're traveling, you're like constantly working. You know, you're constantly on because you're on somebody else's money. You know, you need to justify it, or in your mind, you're a little psychotic because you need to get the story and you're working on a deadline situation. And then finally, this one Sunday, I said, you know what? I'm tired. I don't care. I'm just taking a day off. Well, I go to the stadium to go see a presentation by 700 kids who live in a tent. They're living in these tent cities, and they had put on this play. And I'm sitting there, and the whole time I'm like, gosh, I missed that story. That would have been a nice story. And then my BlackBerry goes off, and I get a friend of mine who's in Africa who says, JCD landing at 5:30. And I'm like, huh? He's like, Jean-Claude. And then I go on Twitter, because that's the new thing now, right? So I go on Twitter, don't see anything on Twitter. I'm not going to tweet anything just yet. And then right after that, I get another BlackBerry message from a source of mine who's in the government. Jean-Claude Duvalier landing at 5:30. And I turned to my friend like, you know, a pregnant woman whose water just burst. I said, listen, we need to get out of here right now. Can you call somebody? And she's like, what? I said, Jean-Claude Duvalier landing now. We need to go. And I didn't even have my driver that day. So we call her friend, and then his tag is expired, and he picks us up, and I'm calling them my driver, screaming at my driver, please come, please come, please come. He finally comes. We drive like crazy to the airport. We're standing there. Some journalists are in. I'm outside. It's chaos. I get a gun pushed in my side by the SWAT because they can't handle journalists in a crowd situation. And then we're all standing there, and then we get tear gassed by the United Nations because they can't handle the chaos. And then we realize that this is all a setup because there's no way that Jean-Claude Duvalier is going to come out the front door to 100 waiting journalists. So at this point, we're in the airport, and we're trying to get out, and we jump on the back of a tap-tap, and we're telling the guy, go, 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 and he's not moving fast enough. By the way, I have on heels and I have on a dress on this day. And so we, you know, and then there's the fence. The one time Haitians get it right, the airport is fenced in, so you can't cut around to the other side. So you literally have to walk 2 miles to the other entrance, you know, where we think the exit is going to happen. And then at this point, you're just running down, and I'm with like some other colleagues of mine. And then I see a friend of mine in there that, I was like, hi. And he's like, comes in, grabs me, pulls me in, and then finally Jean-Claude comes out, and I'm standing there when he walks out. And the girlfriend, who I happen to have known, because I've been trying for 5 years to get an interview with them, and they never would talk to me, and she shows up, Jacqueline, oh, surprise, surprise. You know, like, really? You're surprised you got this far? You know, he managed to go from France to Guadeloupe and come into Haiti undetected until that plane was getting ready to land. Didn't get the interview that day, but I did manage to figure out what he was having for dinner when I ended up at the hotel dining room where he happened to be dining. But a few months later, I did get the interview, and I spent 7 hours with him and his revisionist history, and wrote a story. So basically, I'm going to end it there, but just to say to you that I know a lot of you are journalism students, and this profession is exciting in every way you go. I mean, I've got stories to tell when I was just covering education in Broward County. I think the best thing about journalism is, like I said, it's a license to be nosy. You know, you're driving down the street one morning and you say, I wonder about, well, you know what? You can actually pick up the phone call and call people and ask them questions. As journalists, we don't have any more right than the average citizen, but the fact that you are a journalist, this is a country that respects freedom of the press, it does give you a little bit of latitude. And finally, I would like to just say to you is that having been on the other side, having been the story, and it's not comfortable being the story. And if you actually see this documentary, you will see that at the very end, there's an interview with me because I lost a cousin a few weeks after the earthquake, after an aftershock. And so suddenly, you know, when something like this happens and you're close to the country, the first thing you wonder is about your people, your family. And I lost a lot of friends, but initially I did not lose any family members. And then when you do lose a family member and you now become part of the story, it's very difficult, but you have to maintain your objectivity. You have to remember that first and foremost, you are a journalist. But at the same time, you know, when the cameras are shining on you, you really do respect the people who let you into their living rooms, let you into their lives, and talk to you. It's never easy talking to somebody in a very tragic situation, whether, you know, it's a shooting or it's a funeral, but you'll be amazed at how many times people will talk to you, or if they may not do it initially, you just have to keep trying. You know, if you have this story you think is an important story, you know, you stay at it. And at some point, you know, you're going to get that opportunity to, you know, to get that interview. I mean, the case of, you know, Duvalier, I waited 6 years for it. I finally got it, and I got 7 hours instead of, you know, 7 minutes. Okay. So, questions? Okay, we can't be in a room full of journalists and there are no questions.
How you doing? My name is Michael Finch. I'm also a student journalist. I graduated from here at Miami College. I'm currently at FIU. My question is, when Patrick Farrell was here, he talked about the relationship you two have and how he sort of how you guys have to manage it, because he's a photographer and he's going after the image, and you're the reporter where you really have to work the phones and have to really just get sources. How do you really manage that when you first land and you're in a traumatic situation? How do you guys both manage the needs of both of your practices?
Well, I think you have to remember, I mean, especially today with all the things that you have to do, you know, because we are multimedia companies now. We're no longer just newspapers or TV cameras, you know, we're multimedia. So we're talking about, you know, the web, we're talking about the newspaper, television, we're talking about images. And so you have to be respectful of what the other person needs. And, you know, there's two, you know, examples of this. I remember when Pat and I had to go, we were looking at this story about this mountain town, 6,000 feet up in the mountains, where children were dying of malnutrition. And so, you know, it's like, we have to go up. Yes, we have to go up there. You know, and as we're going, as a photographer, he's looking and he's not seeing anything. So he's already thinking, okay, this is not going to really give me an image. This is going to be very difficult to shoot. I know, but I need to talk to people. I need to do the interviews. And so what you do is you work that. So I get my interviews, and then, okay, so now let's figure out how do we get you some image. In January of this year, this was the 2-year anniversary of the earthquake. And so Pat and I both landed in Haiti at the same, well, he landed right before me and I landed after him. So while he was waiting for me in that 2 hours, you know, I had sent him to a couple of places to see if there were some images that were there. And then we both went to other places. And so you have to be mindful of the fact that it's not, you know, it's a finished product. So how's the product going to look? I'm not a photographer, but I want great photos for my stories, you know, and the better the photos, you know, the better the play the story is going to get in terms of the front page. You know, either it's going to be the centerpiece or it's going to be down low. And so it's a give and take, you know, relationship. And again, like all things and in all relationships, you know, there are different personalities. You may know that this photographer likes to be out very early. So you have to get out very early. But the wonderful thing about our newsroom is that we all have a very great symbiotic relationship. And we understand that we need each other and we have to work together. And you can't be in competition with your colleague, especially when you're traveling.
Thank you.
If there are any folks that need to leave because they have a class, you're welcome to leave at this moment. We're going to continue.
Okay, yeah.
Hi, my name is Ralph. I'm a journalism student. 2 questions. What are your thoughts?
Let me just say this. By the way, you guys can follow me on Twitter. I love Twitter. It's JCQUIE Charles, Jackie Charles, or you can look it up under Jacqueline Charles on Twitter. I need more followers. I'm sorry, go ahead.
What are your thoughts on the future of the industry and what makes a person cut out for the work?
Well, the future. Listen, the night that we won the Emmy, and I have to tell you, I mean, last year has been a great year in terms of awards. And again, I don't do this for the award. As a matter of fact, they're now doing award applications, and I was saying to myself, I guess I should take the time and do this stuff, but I find it to be more burdensome. You like the reward at the end, but you're not going into this thinking about that. But the night that we actually won the Emmy Award, it was such a wonderful experience, and for me, it was a testament to what we've been talking about, conversions. We've been fighting this for so long, and we haven't been able to figure it out. How do you have this marriage between print and the web, and print and video? And so, here we are, a newspaper, and our executive director said that we've seen many awards, in this newsroom, numerous Pulitzers, but we had never seen an Emmy. And so that says to me that there is a future, in this business. I made the joke about Twitter, but I have to tell you, before the earthquake, on January 11th, 2010, I had 250 followers on Twitter. Today, I'm nearly at 12,000. These are people that are interested primarily in Haiti, but they're interested in other things as well. And so I'm on Twitter. People are breaking news on Twitter. Yes, you're doing some self-promotion too, because you want the hits, on your story. But you also want to not scoop yourself. But again, when you look at Twitter, you look at what people are posting, they're posting a lot of times news stories. So I do have, hope in terms of, with the future of journalism. We still have to figure out, how do you help newspapers in the image? It's not that they're a dying industry. I still like to open up my newspaper. That's why I prefer to read my stories as opposed to, on an iPad. And as far as what cuts you out for the story, I think, if you're interested in journalism, you read. Okay? The more you read, the more you know, the better you become as a writer. And then you will also find that you read stories differently from your friends. You're reading a story or an article and you're wondering, how did they get that? What made them open it that way? Where they're going with this? What's the engine that's pushing the story along? And also, you just have to be curious. Don't be afraid to ask the question. You can. I like to say I'm a shy person, and my friends are like, no, you're not. Yes, I am. But when you are like in the moment of the story, or as a journalist, you have this different personality. You almost have this arrogance about this right to know, but you have to use that arrogance to help you. And again, you ask, why, and you have to believe people lie. They lie. So you also want to look for the documents. You look for the documents, you look for it. And I think if you just do that, you will cut out, for this business. The writing, it will come. Some people are great writers, but they're not great reporters. I like to be a great reporter if I had to choose. But it's wonderful to be both, a great writer and a great reporter. But as long as you ask questions and you're curious, you will do fine.
Good afternoon. My name is Rose Coriolan. I was born in Haiti, and I'm a film student at Miami Herald. Following your news at the beginning, we decided to take a camera, and we went to Haiti, which we accomplished a documentary also called Haiti, Another Struggle. And I don't know, it's to die for. To go there to experience the opportunity to see the people and then to see the suffering. And then our documentary was focused mostly on the tent, under the tent, which you gave us a guideline where to go with that. And we really appreciate that. We want to say thank you.
You know, today there are approximately 500,000 people that are still living in tents or under tarps. Initially, after the earthquake, it was 1.5 million. But I like to say to people, the tents have always been there. We just never saw them. You know, the interesting thing about the quake is all the people who were better off, and, you know, they lived behind these walls. The earthquake brought down the walls, both literally and figuratively. So now, you know, the poverty, the struggle, the issue, the deteriorating social conditions is there. It's in your face. And, you know, and a lot of people think, oh, we've got to build houses and that's it. Well, if I build you a house, but you don't have a job to maintain the house, have I improved your life? If you don't have any money to buy water, when you have this disease called cholera that literally will kill you in 2 to 3 hours if you don't get treatment, have I improved your life? You know, so really, you know, what we're looking at today, it's easy to look at the country and say nothing has been done. But what you're looking at was not created on January 12th. It was created way before January 12th. I mean, do you believe that at one point Haiti was ahead of the Dominican Republic in terms of development? I mean, this was a country that was called the Pearl of the Antilles. This is a country that was the first black republic where slaves rose up and they won their independence. But today you look at the country and you barely see trees, and basically people can't afford 5 cents to buy water. They don't have water. You know, this is what the struggle is. But at the same time, it's an interesting story in democracy, in the struggle of democracy. I mean, you heard about Russia, you heard about what happened, but Russia was so far away, and you didn't know any Russians. You didn't really understand what that meant. You didn't understand what Bosnia meant. You sit in American history and you hear about, you know, how we won our independence from the British, but God, that was like hundreds of years ago. You don't understand this. But right here, you've got a friend, you've got a neighbor who was Haitian and who remembers what it was like to live under a dictatorship. And today, you know, it's only been 25 years. It hasn't been an easy 25 years, but it's only been 25 years. And I think if you keep that into perspective, 25, 30 years, you basically put the story of Haiti into perspective, that what you're doing is you are watching a country struggling to be democratic, to be free, where journalists like myself, that we can actually do our job with freedom of the press. I mean, prior to 2006, you had journalists who were being killed in the country. You know, the country's most famous journalist, his murder today is still unresolved, and he's only been dead 10 years. You know, and even today, we are still apprehensive, you know, because we see our press freedoms being threatened today. And so I think that in terms of the story with Haiti, it's not about the tents. You know, you can find that family in the tent, and you can focus on that family in the tent, and you can, you know, use them to tell the story that you want to tell. But for you, it's what is the story? Is it the story about the struggle of democracy? Is it the story about lack of health care? Is it the story about education? What is that story that you want to tell? And using the tent as the backdrop, as the vehicle, you know, to tell the story. Like we use the earthquake, you know, as the backdrop to tell the story of Haiti.
Hi, I'm Dina Weinstein. I teach journalism at the Wolfson campus, and I'm a journalist. Okay. And my question is, your stories are so heart-wrenching. Can you comment on that tug between wanting to help or give advice and that you have to just report the story? And my other question, like, can you speak a little bit about women in Haiti? Like, sure. Are they, like, what did you notice? Any anecdotes? Or are they especially vulnerable? Are they taking the lead?
Well, the first rule of thumb that I always use, and I will give this to you guys, and if you don't remember anything else, remember this, because it applies to the people in Haiti. It applies to the homeless guy on the street, from the story that you have been assigned to go do. And you get into this situation and you want to help. I mean, this is your first instinct. You're a human, right? I mean, how can you just sit there and watch somebody just suffering, and you not say, well, here's $1, you know, well, here's $5, here's this, but you're reporting on the story. But imagine this. So now you give this person $5. What's going to happen tomorrow? Or let's say you give them $5 tomorrow. You give them $5 every day for an entire month, and then suddenly you go broke. What's that person going to do? Yeah, well, you've now disrupted that person's life, because that person somehow managed to survive or to live, you know, without that $5. And so you've given them this sort of quick fix, but you can't maintain it. And so now have you built them false hope? You've made the situation worse. Or if one of your colleagues is coming behind you that now has to do the story and basically can't get to the story because somebody else came and brought them a bunch of things, and now they expect that they need to be paid for the story. We run into this all of the time, and I get so furious with, you know, my anonymous colleagues who I don't know. I know it is a very tough situation, you know, especially if you've grown up and you've been privileged in all of these ways, that you go in and you see somebody suffering. I'm not saying to you that you see somebody on the ground and they're bleeding and you don't run and go get a doctor, or you don't go into your Rolodex and says, hey, listen, I know this great surgeon, call this person. But what I'm saying is that you don't, first of all, ethically, you have to stay ethical. You don't pay people for stories. You don't give them money for stories. You don't build up their hopes. You don't give them false promises. I tell people all the time, look, I'm not going to promise you that the story is going to change your life. The only thing that I can promise you is that somebody's going to read the story. You know, and why should you tell me your story? Because if people don't know your struggle, if they don't know how you're living, if they don't know your issues, then they don't really understand what's going on here. You know, so this is the only thing that I can offer you. And 90% of the times that actually work. But, you know, when you have this, where people have this expectation. And so you're constantly, you know, saying no, no, no. And you have to do that. And I'm not telling you that there aren't times. I mean, just the other day, I was at a camp and I'm in this shack, literally, and this woman is talking to me about the fact that they have to buy water. And I am personally outraged that in a country today where 6,000 people have died of cholera, that, you know, today you're telling people who don't have money to eat that they need to buy fresh water in order to survive. And then she takes me inside her shack and she shows me 6 buckets, and there is not even a drop of water in any of these buckets. Think about it. Not a drop of water in any of these buckets. And yeah, and it's like, but if I give her this 5 cents to go buy a bucket of water today, what is she going to do tomorrow? You're going to be calling me tomorrow and you're going to say, listen, I need 5 more cents. And then the next day, you're going to be calling me and saying, I need 5 more cents. So what I like to think or like to hope is that by doing these stories, by bringing this spotlight to these issues, that maybe the people who are making the decisions are actually going to think about it. And then they'll probably decide, you know what, maybe instead of funding this, we need to maybe look at, you know, supplying water, or we need to build water wells, or we need to do X, Y, and Z. And that's, you know, what our job is about. It's about, you know, yeah, you write about when the train runs on time, but the much more interesting story is about when the train doesn't run on time, and why is that? And as far as women, you know, one of the stories, and I've written a lot of stories over the years, but one of the stories that I wrote after the earthquake that really stands out for me, it was a story of the women who were driving the dead bodies. You saw in that image of the truck, those were bodies that were coming out, and they were going into one of the 4 mass graves that were actually dug. And these women worked for a company called CNN. It was the Haitian government construction company that built roads. And they basically built roads outside of the Capitol. And so a lot of people in the Capitol never really saw them, never really knew what CNN did. And then one day, reporting the stories and trying to have tunnel vision and not see the dead bodies that were literally stacked up on the streets, I'm looking and I'm seeing these huge dump trucks, and there are women. And the women are driving these trucks. And so I say, I want to do a story about the women who are driving these trucks. And so I talked to the guy who happened to have been the former presidential candidate, Jude Celestin, but he was running this company at the time, and basically nagged, and he finally, gave me this woman that that I could follow. And when I did the interview with him, he said a couple of interesting things. He says, I tell every woman that comes in here that this job is going to end her marriage or her relationship. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Because suddenly the women start working, and now they reach a level of empowerment where they're making their decisions. And they're not choosing a man just for the sake of the economic benefits, but they are now working, they have their own money, and they can choose who they want to be with. And a lot of men in Haiti, in a very macho society, Latin, society, are very uncomfortable with that suddenly. And I said, okay. And then he talked about how once the women start working, how they change. Their face clear up, they dress differently. I mean, they have this whole new attitude. But it's an attitude of now I'm in charge of my life. And I remember that statement because years earlier I heard it from doctors who were working with HIV in Haiti, and they talked about this and how they found that one of the keys to curtailing the issue with HIV and AIDS was, again, giving the women the opportunity to really make a living, because the women were in a situation where they were serial monogamous, meaning they're with this guy and then they have a kid from the last relationship, and he's like, I'm not taking care of that kid. So then they have a kid for him, and then he eventually leaves, so they get with another guy. It becomes this sort of economic relationship rather than a relationship based on love. So I follow this woman, and I spend several weeks, almost 2 months, with this woman. I'm in her life, and I meet in the beginning this very strong woman, and she's talking to me about how this job has changed her life and all the things this job has done. And then I said to her, but a lot of the women also are subjects of domestic abuse, and they find that their husbands or their partners are very uncomfortable once they start having, this job and being empowered. No, that's not me. That's not me. My husband's not gonna leave me. We're not gonna have that problem. And in the course of covering the story, she was a victim of a domestic abuse. Her husband pulled out a gun on her at 3 o'clock in the morning and almost killed her. And I'm at the very end of this story, and I've written this story about this real powerful woman who was driving the dead bodies and basically, removing the rubble. And she was different from like the rest, and suddenly she becomes no different from a lot of the other women in the society, whether they're working or not. And then I have to figure out, what do I do? Because I have to be true to my readers in this story, and I can't paint you an image that doesn't exist, but at the same time, I don't want to put her life further in danger by basically, calling out her husband, who happened to have been a police officer who worked for a mayor. So I talked to her, and I did, at the end of the story, sort of reveal a little bit about what had happened. Kept out the part about the gun. She was not very happy, I have to tell you. In the world of the internet, when she was given the interview to the Miami Herald, she did not think that her story was going to end up all over the news in Haiti. But that's what happens these days. We write a story, and then they retranslate it on the radio and in their newspapers, and suddenly everybody knew her business. And she was not very happy with me. But this is one area where I did step in within the boundaries of helping, where I had a source who knew the husband, who knew the mayor, and basically made sure the mayor understood that if anything happened to this woman, that the authorities will know exactly where to look. And later, the woman was actually honored by President Preval in a ceremony of people at the quake, and then she got a kiss from Bill Clinton, so I think she's okay with me now.
Hi, I'm Christina. I'm a Russian journalist from Moscow. And the question is, do you plan to write a book about Haiti or a journalism experience or something?
I don't know.
Thank you.
Everybody's been asking me that question about writing a book. Probably one day. But, if you're going to write a book, you have to be able to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So you also have to be done, with the country at that point. So probably at some point, but we'll see.
Hi, my name's Salma. I'm a student at Alonzo and Tracy Morning, and I have two questions. How is it being a woman in journalism? Like, what's the most difficulty that you go through, and how do you put your emotions aside from your story that you're uncovering?
Okay. As a female working in a very machismo society, whether it's Haiti or, you know, a Latin country, and, you know, being raised in the United States, it's not easy. You know, it's not easy. I mean, what you find is that it becomes a power play, especially when so many of the people you're dealing with are men, and they're quote unquote powerful, you know, powerful men. I was joking to a friend of mine the other day that I now know how Anita Hill feels. You know, when you're like sort of explaining a situation that you interpret as sexual harassment, but if you're explaining it to somebody else, they may not see it because they're looking for those sure signs, and you know, and there isn't. You just have to stay firm. I mean, I think, you know, as a journalist, you're always managing the relationship between you and a source. You know, having people understand you're not their friends. If I were your friend, I would not be writing about you. You know, and so when people always refer to me as, you know, the friend, or you're the president's friend. No, I'm not the president's friend. We have a relationship of mutual respect, and you know, and I write the stories that I have to write. But you're always managing that relationship. But I think you have to first and foremost always remember that you are a journalist. You're there to do a job, and you have to avoid getting yourself compromised. And the minute, you know, if you are friends with somebody and now they're the subject of the news, you have to go directly to your bosses, and you should say to them, you know what, I can't write about such and such because I have a relationship with them, or I know such and such. And I think as long as you're open with that, you know, you offer yourself some protection, because when you are in a high profile beat, you know, like such as I am, you know, people are constantly trying to figure out something, you know, on you, you know, like, I'm going to control you, or this or that. So you just always have to be very wary of that. And as far as your emotions, look, I'm the person who passes out at funerals. And I have to tell you, I've seen so many dead bodies in the last couple of years that I realized the other day that I can't personally go to, like if I go to a funeral of somebody I know, I just cannot look into the casket. But yet I can go into the earthquake situation and you're looking at all of these, you know, dead bodies. The human mind is, I mean, it's just a fascinating thing because it detaches you. And you're always struggling, you're fighting to stay detached. A friend of mine, right after the Quaker colleague, Audra Birch, said to me one day, she says, well, have you cried? And I said, no. And she says, well, why haven't you cried? Because, you know, I'm a crier, right? And she's like, well, how do you cry? And I'm like, you know what, we're not having this conversation. So so another friend of mine who actually, you know, is a doctor and was dealing with these dead bodies right after this happened. I called him up one day and I said, I need to ask you something. He says, what? I said, have you cried? This is a guy, he's a doctor, he's a brain surgeon. He opens up, you know, people's brains. And he says, no. And I said, why not? And he says, because if I start crying, I'm afraid I'll never stop. And so that is the battle that you are, that you're in. It is emotionally draining, and everybody has to figure out how you deal with it. You know, the Herald was great. They offered us, you know, psychologists and psychiatrists and people to talk to after you've seen it. I personally dodged them. You know, I said, I'm Haitian. We don't do that. But you know, you have to figure out what is your coping mechanism. But if you feel like your emotions in the point where you can't do it anymore, that's when you have to say, you know what, I can't do it. I mean, when I was in Cabaret and after I saw the dead babies and somebody was pulling me to go show me the dead, you know, women, you know, old people, I said, no, I can't. I'm done. You know, so don't fight your emotions, but just be aware of them and then talk to somebody, whether it's your boss or someone else.
Yes, my name is Shaida. I'm also a student at Alonzo and Tracy Morning Senior High School. I would like to know, like, what are some things that you have gotten to give up in order to get a story? And also, how does it affect your home life?
Oh, I'm single. I'm not married. It's very difficult for people to maintain any sort of relationship, whether it's friendships, with your friends from high school or whatever. They don't understand that you can't commit to being in their wedding, or you can't commit to that dinner date because you may just have to go. And so you do, and we do have journalists who are married. So I want to let you know, there is, in my newsroom, there are a lot of journalists who are married, and they're not necessarily married to other journalists. But yes, the reason why I do have the flexibility that I can go is that because I don't have kids, and I don't have that extra burden of the guilt. Because it does feel bad when someone says, well, when are you coming back? And I don't get invited to parties anymore because my friends just assume that I'm just not here. But you develop other friendships and things. But as far as to give up the story, to get the story, I think that's what it is. There was once a time when every Friday I was in the clubs. I was on South Beach. Hey, it's a party. And it was. And back then I like to say it was, can you go, as opposed to now you've got to go because this is your beat. I'm on the foreign desk. I'm responsible for whether it's an election in Jamaica or something that's happening in Haiti. You have to be ready to go. But as far as, one-on-one, tit for tat, a trade, no. I think in doing the story, sometimes you have sources. You don't want to burn those sources. And if you can avoid that, you should, because you may have to go back to that well again. You should be willing to protect your sources. A very good source that gives you good information. You should not throw somebody under the bus just for the story. But again, that's part of a conversation that you have with your bosses and your lawyers in your newsroom. In Florida, you can go to jail for not giving up your source. And I had this question asked once on a story. Our lawyer says, are you willing to go to jail for this source to not reveal who this person is? I said, yes. I say yes. That relationship was very important to me. Every relationship like that may not be important to you, but there's the high of the story, but you should also think about the consequences and work out some of those scenarios and sort of figure that out before you go, so you also stay in control as much as you can, with the story.
Hello, I'm from Miami-Dade. My name is Hari Steele. What do you do on your downtime?
In my downtime.
I actually have two questions. And could somebody with a mass communications degree do this?
Yes, we have
definitely.
Right? Yes, we have people who don't even have degrees.
Right.
Although a lot of that's get your degree. Get your degree. Okay, get your degree. You need that backup. On my downtime, I watch mindless reality shows, Real Housewives, things that do not make me think.
Jersey Shore?
Huh?
Jersey Shore?
No. I can't get into that. No. I'm about, I do watch basketball, all those, crazy shows. But no, you should have balance, and so. I have friends, I hang out. It would be nice to be on an island somewhere, but the idea of having to travel and it's not work related, you're like, oh God, I'll just stay here. So, and again, part of what I like to think that makes me and makes my stories interesting and that makes people want to read my stuff is because I present them with different things, and I expose them. And even on my downtime, like one of my colleagues, a photographer, asked me yesterday, you want to go to a voodoo funeral? No. But I don't know. Maybe I will. And then you're there at a social event and then you see something, that's kind of curious. Let me look into that. And the next thing you know, you have a story. So, and it's to say that even on your downtime, if you're a journalist and you're interested in this, your mind is always working. And don't turn down, an invitation, to go to something because you never know.
What's the difference with a degree?
I think you need a degree. I believe that with today's environment and everything that's happening economically, that you need a fallback, okay? The thing about being a journalist is that we are jack of all trades and experts of none, however the saying go. But because we have this ability to research, to ask questions, to find information, I think that we are in a post-journalism. People are getting laid off. Newspapers are laying off people. Television stations are laying off people. And so what do? you know, so you're laid off and you have no degree. Where can you go? But if you have that degree, you know, there are other places that you can go. You can go into teaching. I mean, there are other great things to do post-journalism. And so, and I would say you don't necessarily need to major in journalism. You can major, you know, in video and filmmaking and, you know, in other things that bring added value to this. But I think that for all of you guys that are here, you know, when you look at the economy, you look at what's happening, we're talking about iPads and not books these days. You look at the advances in technology, that you need to basically be prepared for whatever coming tomorrow.
Oh, hi, my name is Brittany Ortiz, and I go to Alonzo Tracy Morning Senior High. I know that a part of journalism, it's very important to like have a lot of connections. So what are some tips you have for people who are like trying to get and maintain sources?
Okay, great. That's a good question. You know, you're only as good as your sourcing, okay? Finding the people who are in the know and who have the access, even if you don't, to basically give you the heads up. And so one, you know, maintaining those relationships. You know, I get sources on Saturday. I had a whole list of things to do on my downtime, my nails, my hair. And then a source calls me and says, hey, I'm here in Miami. Can we have lunch? And I'm like, yes. I went and I had lunch with my source. And it was good to maintain that relationship. Did I get anything that I had to run into the newspaper the next day and write a story? No. But I know that this is somebody that is in the know, and that if I'm searching for something that, you know, they'll help me out. You're always having these conversations, you know, with people. Sometimes just check in, you know, on people. You have a source, don't call them just because you want information. Just, hey, how are you? How's everything? How's your family? And be sincere and mean it. And so I'm always doing that. I mean, when I go to Haiti, there are people that I always call. Whether I see them or not, I always call them. The same thing in terms of, you know, Jamaica. Something happening, I've got some sources, and I'm like, hey, how are you? What's happening? And so sometimes when news is breaking or something is percolating, they remember you, and they, you know, and they reach out to you. And at the same time, I'm also not telling somebody else, well, such and such said. You know, that's the other thing. You're the guarder of the secret, you know? You know who your sources are. You're not trying to turn over your source book to somebody else so that they can, you know, get the scoop. And also remember that if you decide to go into journalism and you were covering a beat and the person previous to you was covering that beat, what you don't expect for that great relationship that they have to transfer to you. Again, it's about personalities and how people function and how people work. But also your work stands for yourself. If you do good work, people will respect you, people will turn to you, people will read you. You know, I like to say that, you know, in the State Department, in the White House, when they want to know what's happening in Haiti and what's going on, they turn to the Miami Herald, and they do. You know, I've got, you know, I'm in Haiti and I see Bill Clinton. Hey, Jackie. Hi, Mr. President. You know, because that's where they're looking for when they want that. But that's something that you build, you know, over time. So I would say get to know a lot of people, you know, figure out who's what, you know, get to know the secretaries. Get to know the personal assistants. You know, they actually are a wealth of information, believe it or not. And a lot of times they'll save you on stories.
Hi, I am a student in Alonzo Tracy Morning. My name is Orlando. And I was wondering, have you ever, when doing, you know, when reporting or writing about news that are kind of important, kind of shocking, so to speak, about like the earthquake in Haiti and the hurricanes, have you ever found yourself struggling to not put emotions into what you're trying to write or report? Because I know, like, it seems to be kind of human nature to actually.
It is human nature, but it's also interesting that you become very robotic at times as well. I mean, you know, when you're doing these stories, you do develop at times. And everybody's different, but with me, it's almost like I get like this sort of tunnel vision, you know? So I'm in the car and there's a stack high of dead bodies that's here and I don't see them because I'm not focusing on them. You know, but at some point when you're focusing, especially if you're a camera person, you're focusing, it gets to a point where you're like in sensory overload, and you've got to just take a moment. Again, there's nothing wrong with being human and feeling the emotions. I think what you have to do is you have to be in check of your emotions. You have to be aware that you are human and that you can get emotional with the story, and then when you feel the need to pull back, that you have to pull back. But what does happen after a while, and I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but after you've covered so many dead bodies and you've seen so much disaster, it does become robotic, you know? And then when it's all done and then you file and then you really start to think about it, yeah, sometimes it does like really hit you, you know, what you've just been through.
Hi, my name is Anderson Rodriguez. I'm from Alonzo and Tracy Morning as well. I wanted to know, have you ever got persecuted, or like, since the government in Haiti is so like masculine and stuff like that, like they don't like you in your business, have you ever been like persecuted or like, you know?
I have to say that I've been fortunate so far that, you know, that I have not had this, although a number of my colleagues, you know, have had it. I do live with the reality that every day that you know, that these are different times, and that, you know, there's a level of danger, you know, in what you do. I think for us, for journalists who were in Haiti for the last, you know, 5 years during the term of President Preval, he had an enormous amount of respect for the press. He didn't care for the press. He hardly gave any press interviews. And if you wrote something that he didn't like, he sort of had another way of sort of getting at you. He basically made you sweat it out, that he would like publicly embarrass you. I mean, he just had this way about him. And this happened to me once where I literally was sitting in a press conference and I was just like, oh my God, I just know he's gonna say something out loud and he's just gonna call me out in front of all of these people. Because I truly like to be the fly on the wall. But that is, you know, how he was. And one of the last public speeches he gave, he says, I hope that the person who comes behind me, you know, respects criticism and respects liberties of the press. And this is a country where a number of journalists have died over the years. And so today, we have a new administration in charge. There's been a couple of incidents where the president has cursed out journalists who've asked questions, or he's been aggressive with them when they've asked questions. And so we all are keenly aware that these are different times. And so we'll see how it goes. And hopefully with this administration, that it's just sort of like a Newt Gingrich moment. And there's nothing, you know, really serious, you know, behind the attitude.
Okay, I'm Steve. I read you almost, you know, each of your stories in Miami Herald.
Well, thank you.
Because I'm Haitian. And my question is, how can you build up your, can you trust your sources? Because for the last election, before even the results were published, you revealed who won the elections. What would have happened if, for example, it was Mrs. Maniga who had won the election? Or can you trust your sources, like you publish the result before even it was published by the Provisional Council?
Yes, I did. I was the one that broke the story that Michelle Bachelet was the next president. I had a journalism professor, Chuck Stone, who was my professor at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He's a respected journalist, and he always said to me, "If your mama says she loves you, check it out." Do you understand that? If your mother says she loves you, I mean, who in the world is going to love you, right? It's your mother, right? But even if your mother says she loves you, check it out. So that's to say that your sources, you don't know. I may totally trust this person, but I don't know what their relationship is with this person. I don't know what their angle might be. You know, people want to use journalists all of the time, and they attempt to use us. So when somebody gives you something, you have to check it out. You know, where is the documentation? Where is it? So just to give you a quick background on that without revealing my sources, all through the night, I got absolutely no sleep because my phone kept ringing about the head of the Electoral Council showing up at the tabulation center where they were tabulating the results. And at one point, I just got so furious, and I told one of the international observers, I said, listen, I know you're not interested in what the results are, but I think somebody needs to make a copy because I'm afraid they may try to change the results. And so this international observer says the results are already on their way to the CEP and then to the president. I said, oh God, okay. And then I made a phone call, talked to someone, and I said, I heard the results are in. And the person says, yes, I have them now. They're being walked over to the president as we speak. I said, what are the results? And they didn't have the numbers, but they said, it's Michel Mateli. I said, really? They said, yes. I said, okay. Then I contacted another source of mine who I know has a big mouth, and I didn't tell this source what the information was. I said, listen, have you heard anything about the results? So that source says, let me check. And then the source calls me back and says, I talked to 2 different ambassadors, and they say it's Michel Mateli. I said, are you sure? They said, yeah. I said, okay. So then I knew that the Electoral Council had to report to the U.S. government what the results were. So I reached out to the U.S. ambassador. He was not in Haiti. He was in Miami. I said to him, I'm hearing the results. Do you have it? He says, no, I'm in Miami. I said, okay. Then I reached out to other people in the U.S. government, and they said to me, yes, we're hearing. At the time, they told me 3-1, and it ended up being 2-1, which we later changed. I confirmed that with 7 different sources, none of whom speak to each other, including the fact that I had somebody who literally saw the paper that was taken to the president. But even after that person told me, I checked it out with 6 other people, and that's when I broke the story that Michel Mateli was the next president of Haiti. I have a question.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Joel. I'm a Miami college student. I guess I'd like to ask if you could provide any tips on, for instance, if you're working for a newspaper or magazine of sorts where you have an overbearing supervisor. For instance, one of my friends, he works for an up-and-coming fashion magazine, and one of his coworkers was trying to do certain things to sabotage his position because my friend is, extremely talented. He went to NYU, and then in some cases he'll try to push on some of his responsibilities onto my friend to do it for him. So how do you, I guess my question, how do you juggle the establishing your boundaries so people respect them, but at the same time, as a Miamian, and he's also in Miami, you don't pull out your Miami hood out, if you will, where you want to get crazy and cuss somebody, but you still maintain that professionalism.
Well, I think that's the key. It's professionalism. I mean, how do you manage the manager? I mean, look, editors are going to, assign you stories all the time that you're not interested in or you think are stupid. It happens to all of us. And I think that what you need to do is you just have to balance. I mean, first of all, don't tell them in their face that it's stupid. Always remember that level of respect. And you do the story, but you also do the stories that you want to do. And honestly, and if the story is just not working out, I think also you go and you sit down and you talk to them. I mean, communication is key. We are in the business of communications, but oftentimes we don't communicate. So I think that you have to communicate. You find mentors in your newsroom. So maybe somebody in this gentleman's, workplace knows the supervisor's Achilles heel and can basically give some advice on, how do you better manage him? What should you say? How should you approach it? And that's also important. Don't also feel like you're in such this competitive situation that you go to work every day. You can't talk to the person sitting next to you, or you can't talk to somebody else because you see them as being your enemy or your competitor. You build relationships in the newsroom. Find mentors, people to help guide you in these situations. And then sometimes it does become a situation where it's just not workable and you just have to leave. And, and you have to take opportunities. But don't quit a job if you don't have another one, okay? Don't do that. And if you're going to play the game, make sure you're ready to leave if you do. But, again, communicate, and I think that you will work through, these issues. Thank you, guys. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. And you guys, if you have follow-up questions, definitely give me my email as I mentioned, we have a Haiti site. So I'm going to put it back here. So right up here on this Haiti site, that's my Twitter feed. Follow me. And then this story that's there happens to be the jazz story that I told you about. The pictures were taken by Carl Jus. And then go on the site, read, look at our videos, any other questions you have, jcharles@miamiherald.com. Please feel free to, okay? Thank you guys so much and good luck.